When we talk about war, we usually think armies, strategies, you know, big picture stuff.
Right. The headlines, the maps, the political moves.
But today, I want us to shift focus. Think less about the front lines, more about, well, the kitchen tables. How does conflict actually change the day-to-day for ordinary people?
Exactly. It's about understanding that rhythm, how decisions made far away land right in the middle of something.
Yeah, and our sources give us some really stark details. Like, picture a mother in Lahore. She's not hearing explosions, maybe, but she can't sleep because her son is stationed near the border. That constant worry.
Or think about a father in Amritsar. Every time his phone rings,
Yeah.
that little jolt of fear. Has something happened? It becomes almost Pavlovian, that dread.
Mm-hmm. And it's like war injects this low-level anxiety into everything, doesn't it? It just becomes the background noise.
It really does. It's not just moments of panic. It's a sustained state of being on edge. And that's incredibly draining for families, especially in areas close to conflict zones.
And what about the kids? In Karachi, in Delhi, schools suddenly close. Adults are talking in hushed tones. They don't get the details, but they feel it. They feel the fear.
Oh, absolutely. Children are like emotional sponges. They absorb the atmosphere around them. Any disruption to their routine, any sense of unease from their parents, they pick up on it immediately.
And that kind of instability, that underlying fear, it must have an impact, right, on how they see the world.
Definitely. Psychologically, prolonged uncertainty like that can really affect a child's sense of safety, their development, how they learn to trust. It's significant.
So that's who we're focusing on, not the generals, not the politicians making speeches, but the baker, the tailor, the teacher driving to school, the student trying to study, people just living their lives.
Yeah, the vast majority who bear the consequences but never started the fight.
So our mission, really, in this deep dive, is to get past those big national narratives and understand the emotional truth of war for these individuals on all sides.
Exactly. To find the human experience underneath the flags of the rhetoric.
Okay, so let's get into it. One of the most unavoidable impacts is just loss, personal loss. We came across the story of Rahana Bibi from Rawalpindi. Her husband was in the army, killed at the border, and what she said was it wasn't about anger or even pride, really. She just felt broken.
That word broken is so powerful. It speaks to a kind of devastation that national narratives about sacrifice often just glide over. For the person left behind, the loss is total and deeply personal.
Right. It's not abstract. And her question really cuts through everything else. She asks, I lost my partner. My children lost their father. Did anyone win?
Wow.
It just hangs there, doesn't it? It forces you to ask, what does winning even mean when the cost is that personal, that shattering?
It fundamentally challenges how we measure the outcomes of conflict. Is victory measured in territory gained or in lives ruined? For people like Rahana Bibi, that calculation looks very different.
And then there are the scars that don't necessarily involve death, but still linger long after the fighting stops.
Yes, the psychological weight.
We learned about Rajveer, a taxi driver in Indian Punjab. He's a veteran, served in the Kargil conflict, and apparently he just doesn't talk about it much.
That's very common. That's silence. It's often a sign of deep trauma. Reliving it, even by talking about it, can be incredibly painful. It's a way of coping, paradoxically.
But he did say something that just stopped me in my tracks. He said, I saw more funerals than flags.
More funerals and flags. That flips the whole script, doesn't it?
Completely. We see the parades, the symbols of victory or national pride. But his dominant memory, just death, constant mourning.
It's such a simple, stark way to communicate the sheer human cost. It bypasses all the
War just doesn't
tragically so. A missile doesn't check your religion before it lands. An airstrike doesn't ask for your passport.
Especially in modern conflicts, the lines get so blurred.
They do. And often, it's the people with the least power, the fewest resources, who end up suffering the most vulnerable.
And that came through really clearly, the disproportionate impact on the poor. Farmers losing their crops, small businesses forced to close because of curfews, kids unable to get to school because roads are blocked or it's just too dangerous.
For communities already struggling, conflict is like throwing gasoline on a fire. It just amplifies every existing hardship, makes everything more precarious.
And the long-term damage, the economic fallout, can last for years, trapping people in poverty.
Absolutely. It hinders any kind of recovery. But beyond the economic, there's the trauma.
Right. Not just the soldiers, though obviously them too, with unseen wounds, but the kids growing up surrounded by this. There was this image mentioned, children drawing tanks instead of trees.
That image says so much. It's about how conflict reshapes a child's entire reality, what they consider normal. Violence becomes normalized. That early exposure can have such deep, lasting effects on their psychological well-being.
War takes lives, obviously, but it also steals childhoods, it steals futures.
It fundamentally alters trajectories.
Which I think brings us to why we're having this conversation, why we're doing this deep dive. There's this need to shift the narrative, isn't there?
Definitely. To move beyond just counting casualties or analyzing political motives and actually listen to these personal stories. To center the human emotion.
To rehumanize it all. Because it's easy to get lost in the jargon, the strategy talk.
Exactly. The politics, the objectives, they matter. Of course they do. But they shouldn't erase the fundamental human cost.
One source put it very starkly. Easy to drop bombs, harder to build bridges.
That really captures the imbalance, doesn't it? Destruction is often swift, tragically simple in some ways.
But building understanding, building peace, that's the hard, slow work.
And it requires consciously looking past the divisions, past the borders, and seeing the shared experiences, the shared pain, the shared anxieties.
Our sources pointed this out too, mentioning cities like Faisalabad and Lucknow, or Quetta and Kolkata. They might be in different countries now, but the underlying human experiences, they resonate across those lines.
Those connections are vital. They remind us that beneath the political labels, there are common threads, shared vulnerabilities. Recognizing that is step one towards empathy.
So really, if you're listening right now, whether you're in Pakistan or India or anywhere else in the world, the message coming through is about that shared humanity.
Absolutely. As one person put it so simply, we're not enemies. We're mothers, fathers, sons, daughters. We laugh the same, cry the same, fear the same.
Just acknowledging that feels foundational. It's the starting point.
It is. And we shouldn't need another tragedy, another crisis, to remind us of the real cost of conflict.
Because that cost doesn't just disappear when the fighting stops, does it? It lives on, in memory, in trauma.
For years, even generations, those invisible scars are real, and they shape communities long after the physical battles end.
So the encouragement from our sources is actually quite direct. Try to connect. Reach out to someone from the other side, however you define that, and just listen. Listen to their story.
Because chances are you'll hear echoes of your own life, your own worries, your own hopes.
Yeah, you'll find that common ground.
And building those individual connections, fostering that real human understanding.
Yeah.
That's how you start to dismantle the walls. That's the foundation for something better.
And that's really why we wanted to have this conversation today, to share this perspective, because maybe understanding the real personal impact is the strongest argument for peace there is.
Because when you strip it all back, take away the politics, the history, the flags, what are you left with?
Yeah.
Behind every war.
Yeah.
They're just people. People simply trying to live.